Well, I want to welcome you to today's meeting. Today is September 25th, and it is, let's see, it is 9:37. So I just want 7 minutes to be late at some point. So thank you, Pam.
Well, and on time.
We'll end on time. Yes, we will, no matter what, actually. So I thought it would be fun to go around. We've got a few new board members. So what I'd like to do is start with the online folks. And if you are new, I would like you to just say your name, your city you represent, and maybe just tell us one thing about yourself. So if we can start, I'll call them out because it's hard. And we're going to use, everyone else is going to also just introduce themselves, even the ones that have been here for a while. So you tell me, why don't we go ahead and start with Donna Jessup. Donna,
Hi.
there you go. Go ahead,
Donia.
Donna.
My name is Donia Jessup,
Donia, okay.
mayor of Hilldale. One thing about myself that we may not all know is I have 10 children and 6 grandchildren. So, and I'm in my second term as mayor. That's just one thing to know that I can share.
Well, with 10 kids, you're going to be a huge asset to the board because you've worked with a lot of collaboration and discipline and all those fun things that come along with having a big family.
All kinds of personalities. I truly am honored to be asked to be a part of the ULCT board. And I really apologize for today. I have Senator Ellison coming out to Hilldale for the first time. We've been working for a year to get him out here. So I'm only going to be able to attend for a few minutes. He's upstairs waiting.
Well, we appreciate you jumping on, Donia, and this is going to be really fun to spend some time and get to know you. So thank you.
I'm excited. Thank you. I will be there in person as often as possible. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks. Let's move on to Michelle Randall.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry I got on late. My phone has been ringing off the hook this morning. You know how that goes on a Monday morning. What do you want to know since I joined late?
She's the mayor of St. George, and
Yes.
How long have you been on the board, Mayor?
This is I think 3 years now.
Fantastic. All right, thank you. Let's move on to.
Let's do board and then we can
Yeah.
briefly say staff. So it'll be Jessica Egbert.
Okay, Jessica, hi.
Turning on my video here so I can see faces. Hey, everybody. I am Jessica Egbert from the Mapleton City Council. Hopefully I'll get to stay in that position since I'm in this year's cycle. And this will be my second term on the league board. And I love it. Being part of the League Army is so rad. So welcome everybody to the board who's newbies.
Thanks, Jessica. All right. Why don't we go to
Do Mayor Walker.
Mayor Walker? Introduce yourself, you important VIP now, because you are the VP.
Oh, you're still muted, Mayor, but we can see you. I can't read your lips.
How's that?
Better.
Many like me muted. Anyway, Mayor Walker from Draper City. I don't know one thing about me. I like to mountain bike.
That is a shocker. We all had no idea, sir. Thank you, Mayor.
Go to Mayor Johnson.
Okay, Mayor Johnson. Tell us what city you represent and how long have you been on the board with us?
All right. Well, Lehigh City, I'm the mayor there. Been on the board. I'm actually still a kind of a rookie mayor, so I think I got put on about 6 months ago, but I don't remember exactly. So I guess something about me is maybe a lot of people don't know is I've had so far just over 22 years of service in Lehigh City. And I also like to mountain bike and I try to keep up with Troy, but it's really, really hard.
Thanks, Mayor Johnson.
Let's go to Mayor Peterson.
Okay, Mayor Peterson.
Sorry, I'm trying to do both video and let's see.
We
Am I
can say
unmuted?
yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
you're
yes,
good.
you
Okay.
look great.
Okay. Thank you. So I'm Lindsay Peterson. I represent North Logan City. And I'm missing a pickleball tournament to be here this morning, and I'm sure it'll be worth it. I'm brand new.
Well, welcome. And
Thank
we'll
you.
just go get them next time. All right, let's move on. Who's next?
To Mayor Wright.
Okay, Mayor Wright.
I'm Mickey Wright. I'm the mayor of Torrey, and I've been a member of the Utah League of Cities and Towns since May, and I'm now starting my own term. I filled one out. You may not know that I'm a retired cybersecurity software engineer that I did for 30 plus years, and enjoyed that. And that's how I got into working with Torrey and Capitol Reef National Park, as volunteering as their IT guy, and became mayor.
Perfect. Well, we're glad we have you because that's a hot topic right now. All right, let's move on. Is there any other mayors that are online that we need to touch base with, or is that it?
That is it. We also have from staff, Gary Watcott and Todd Godfrey joining us online.
Perfect. Okay, thank you for joining online. Let's go ahead and go around the room. Let's start with Justin. Why don't you just introduce yourself and just go quickly around the room?
Justin Lee, Deputy Director. That's good, right?
That was great.
Mayor Dirk Burton, Westwood.
Mary Winch, Manti Council. Tammy Tran, Kidsville.
Dan Dugan, Salt Lake City Council.
Don Ramsey, South Jordan City.
Steve Bradshaw, Bountiful City Council. Are we not doing anything fun about it anymore? I love
Sorry,
breakfast.
we're out of time.
I'd really love to have.
And then let's start with Molly back here.
Yes, hi, Molly Wheeler, Deputy Director at the League.
Liam Trailkill, Policy Analyst and Program Manager.
Roger Chu, I'm General Counsel.
Cameron Dale, Executive Director.
We have Michelle Kafusti, President of the League.
I'm Seth Perrins. I'm the City Manager of Spanish Fork.
Jeff Silverman has been, but I want one interesting fact about me tonight is that I am going to be elected to my third term as mayor tonight by my city council.
Well, why do you look so clean cut?
I don't like this about you, Jeff. You're like glowing. I don't know, something that looks like maybe.
I don't know. It's,
I don't know.
yeah, when you become a great leader, you're glowing.
I love it. All right, Mayor Shepherd.
Mark Shepard, Mayor, Cleveland City.
Connie McKay, Riverton City Council.
Jared T, Legal Director for the League.
Nick Jarvis, Chief Operating Officer for the League.
Mary Malkovich, City Council with the City of Woodland Hills.
And then let's start back here.
Katie Harley, Event Manager of the League.
Personality Policy Director for the League.
Angela Adam, Operations Coordinator with the League.
Angela Price, Policy Director for Salt Lake City.
Meg Townsend, I'm with the West Detroit Regional Council. I'm our Community Development Director. Andrew and Miranda, or sorry, they can't make it. I'll be third string.
Thank you.
You're first string.
Okay,
Isaac Paxton, Provo Deputy Mayor.
perfect. Let's
We
go.
also had Councilmember David Baird join us online.
Oh, perfect. Welcome, Councilmember Baird. All right, let's move on to item number 2, the administrative items. I need a motion to approve the minutes from September 6th, 2023, and then the business session of September 8th, 2023. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
All right, there's a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
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 Motion approves and motion carries. Thank you. All right, our next item of business, I just wanted to remind you, I want to call for the conflict of interest disclosure. It's all in your packet. If you haven't filled one of these out, especially the new board members, the league loves these and loves to get them handed in. So we want to make them happy and, you know, keep us out of jail, league law. So do your disclosure and send it in. And then one other item I want to speak to, and then I'll turn it over to Cam, is just in our packet, we also had our board of directors meeting schedule, just so you can get those all on your calendar for the whole entire year. When I saw this, I thought, I'm exhausted. but this is what we do, right? So it has our convention dates and everything. So make sure you take note of that. And then one other piece that I just really loved, and this was a request I made, was this map of the state that shows where everybody's located. For me, I'm such a visual learner. This just really helped, and I keep it in my packet all the time. So thank you, Lee, for doing that. All right, Cam, we'll turn the time over to you.
We do need a motion to approve the schedule.
Oh, we do. Okay, who would like to make a
I'll
motion?
make a motion, Jeff Silverman, to approve the board scheduled meetings for 2023-2024.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Because we're all gonna be there 100%. I just know it. All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Did we get the online folks? Okay, perfect. All right, any nays? Seeing none, the motion carries, and the meetings are approved for the next year, 2023-2024.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, everybody, for joining us this morning. And we're excited to have this leadership team in place for the next 12 months. Thank you for your willingness to take time and energy to dedicate on behalf of all cities statewide. I want to take just a couple minutes as we start here to lay the groundwork for your responsibilities as board, and then Roger can chime in as well as general counsel. So the league is a public entity, which means all of our board meetings are public meetings. We will hold public hearings during the budget process, but otherwise our meetings are simply that, public meetings. There's not a public hearing component to them. In between board meetings, the league officers, which consist of the president, first vice president, second vice president, immediate past president, and city manager representative, UCMA representative, will meet as needed, which is authorized under our constitution. The league officers are allowed to meet in between board meetings to essentially carry on the will of the board. Justin, when we get to the advocacy section, we'll talk about a couple of the meetings that we have scheduled with legislative leadership where the league officers will be going. And then as appropriate, we'll take other board members with us. So for example, when we're having meetings related to the UEOC, we'll have Mayor Ramsey joining, having Mayor Ramsey join us for those meetings. I work for the board, so I'm directly accountable to you as board members, and then Roger's the general counsel and would represent this board if there was ever any sort of litigation.
Cam, let me make a comment is that your leadership meetings, et cetera, are not considered public meetings.
The officer meetings, yeah.
Officer meetings, it's not posted, minutes are not kept. You're also not making decisions that bind the whole organization.
That's right. Yep, excellent point there, Roger. And but I just want to make sure people are aware of the distinction of the officers and the board as we get underway. Mayor Kafusi mentioned that she's already tired looking at the board schedule. We do have rapid fire succession of board meetings between the convention and mid-October, and that's because everything revolves around the UEOC schedule and the UEOC meetings on October 18th, which is referenced in your packet. Because of the condensed amount of meetings we have in September and October, we at this point are not planning on a board meeting in November. We normally have one in November, but our recommendation as of now as staff is to not have one in November because of how many we're doing in September and October, and recognizing it's an election year and then elections been pushed back a couple of weeks. That would change if the officers and league staff decide we do need a board meeting in November, but as of now, we're not planning on having one.
Thank you.
For those of you who are on the ballot this year, hopefully that helps. You as a board set the general policy direction, and so when we get to the advocacy section today, there'll be several important time-sensitive UEOC and Commission on Housing Affordability issues that we need to discuss and get direction on today. So we're looking forward to that discussion. As part of your responsibilities on the board, you are the eyes and ears, in addition to league staff, with our members around the state. One thing we've offered in the past, and we renew the offer now, is if you want an email list of the mayors or council members in your region. Sometimes board members have sent a Christmas message or holiday message to folks, or other types of outreach. So if you are interested in that, please just drop a note to Nick and we can circulate those lists. The other thing we've done in the past, and we mentioned this at the last board meeting, is we have elevated a member of the board who represents a community off the Wasatch Front to essentially be the spokesperson for rural Utah. Our 5 officers right now are all on the Wasatch Front. but recognizing that we're a statewide organization, it was very helpful last year to have Mayor Monson representing Blanding be part of some of the officer conversations as appropriate. So our request is staff, we don't need to designate that person in this meeting, but now that the new board is in place, those of you off the Wasatch Front, we would ask to just coordinate. We could actually start an email thread with those of you off the Wasatch Front and just designate who do you want your liaison to be, coordinating with the officers to again join meetings as appropriate as we go through the next 12 months.
And the time commitment on that is not extreme, but and a lot of it can be done virtually. But when, especially even during the session, we meet with the governor's office about once a week, which is really useful, I think. And it's great to have that off the Wasatch Front board member participate at least by Zoom. If not, the governor's office is all equipped to do that. So.
Yep, exactly. Thank you, Mayor. So with that being said, any questions about, all right, let me add one last thing. You as a board, in addition to giving the policy direction and how we create that policy sandbox, you also approve the budget. And the biggest piece of that is approving the membership dues, and we'll be bringing recommended dues in December for you to consider in January. And then when we meet in St. George, we'll have the strategic meeting before the mid-year conference, and then you'll approve a tentative budget in May and then the final budget in June. So any just questions about board duties and responsibilities before we get underway? Nick, do you want to mention the orientation packet?
Yeah, in your email that included today's packet, you also have the board orientation packet, which has all the staff contact information, as well as all of our governing docs. So when Cam's talking about your administrative responsibilities for this organization, you'll see you've got a constitution, which the membership has to change, bylaws, which the board can do, and then also our accounting and personnel policies and procedures, which if there, which runs the staff here, if there are any changes to that, we bring those to the board for changes there. So, all right, here I have a few hard copies of it, and we can print more if folks like, and you have that in your email.
Great, ready?
So just one little side note, Pam did not even recognize that the mayor of Cougar Town wore red today to represent the victory on Saturday. Congratulations.
We're blue.
We're so alive, Sydney.
I'm just glad my voice is back after Saturday, because I feel like we in the crowd, along with the defense, did our part for that.
You did. My son was there and he said it was awesome. And I kept saying, now who won? And he's like, if you ask me one more time. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for wearing red.
My favorite color, but don't tell my people. Okay, item number 3, let's go on and turn the time over to Ian.
Hey, sounds good. I don't know what's more or less awkward to do, so I'll stand right here. So we have one board to fill the Utah Indigent Defense Commission, which has been a long time coming, but we finally got someone. Thank you, Jared. The Utah Indigent Defense Commission was created in 2016. In the board packet, I put a few of the bullet points of what they're responsible for, such as providing guidance and standards for systems to ensure and oversee local defense services, and awarding state funding to help with some of the local indigent defense services. The commission has 15 voting members, for which the league appoints 2. The other person serving on the commission right now is Ryan Luce, who's the city attorney in South Jordan. And the league is recommending that the board appoint Aaron McKnight, the deputy city attorney for Midvale, who previously served as a prosecutor for Orem City before becoming their assistant city attorney prior to his current position in Midvale right now.
So I know Ryan Aaron from a number of other, I know Ryan too, but I know Aaron from a number of other associations. And I think given his prosecutorial experience and he's actually a good, capable guy, I'm happy to make a motion to appoint him to that board.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Perfect. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you.
Can I just add a little disclaimer that if I ever like start to vote, you just tell me, I'll remember I wasn't supposed to say. I'll remember I wasn't supposed
I'm
to.
right behind you.
It's so easy to be completely mute. So just know if I ever like vote ignore that and know that I'll remember I wasn't supposed to vote. Anyway, it's gonna take me
It's when you vote no that will.
take me a minute to not be like, I'd love to make that motion. Okay, I can't do that. Yeah, anyway, so, yeah, for the record.
We
I
got
just
you.
wanted to be clear.
Perfect. Okay, thanks. Let's go ahead and move on to item number 4, our engagement report from Molly Wheeler, our Deputy Director.
Hello, I will stand as well. So we wanted to give you a bit of an update from annual. We think it went very well. We had about 560 attendees join us, which was on par with what we've had consistently over the past few years. We received a lot of really positive feedback and a lot of really helpful feedback moving forward. One thing that we really want to look at is how we are focusing on engagement and in training with our members. This year at annual, we created a specific rural track. We had received feedback in the past that some of our rural members weren't entirely sure where to go. We also created a lot of 101 programming for people, like budgeting 101, communications 101, and I think those went well. One thing we want to focus on moving forward is making sure that we are identifying the target audience for some of those. We still received some feedback that people kind of weren't aware that those were for them and so didn't attend. Or, for example, with our land use 101, it drew in a lot of planners, and even though it was targeted towards elected officials, and so that kind of changed the focus of it. And so that's something that we're going to look at moving forward, of just making sure that we are ensuring that there is programming for everybody within those breakouts, and making sure that folks know kind of what is might be the most beneficial for them. Obviously, folks are still welcome to attend whatever they like. Within that, we're looking at how we can best engage with our members in as far as trainings go. And one thing that we've been working on and chatting about with our new communications manager, Cassidy, is really focusing on making sure that people understand the basics of how cities work, understand how to implement and act within their communities, and then finally understand how to advocate at the legislature for themselves. And so we are working on kind of creating a track so that people can kind of understand the foundations, understand how to implement, and then understand how to advocate. And so we will be trying to, we will be working to implement over the next year. We're really excited about that. Are there any questions on that before I?
So I just want to say, and I think, I know I speak for the board members, but it was an excellent conference. It's amazing how the staff organizes it and keeps it flowing so that there, I don't remember any super glitches or anything like that. It all went smoothly. I got lots of compliments and thanks to you guys for lining up the 3 keynotes that were there. They were super interesting, and people said even though, that some of them weren't necessarily what were in our wheelhouse about planning and zoning and things like that. They were super interesting and inspiring. So it was a great program. Thank you.
It was great. I think the new meals were fantastic. Thank you. I enjoyed those.
I love it. I personally, made it.
I did miss UTA parking. UTA passes.
All right. If there's nothing else with that, I'll jump to EOE. So we chatted about this a little, or I chatted about this a little during my remarks at annual. But with the change in the election cycle this year, we are looking at having a smaller window for our newly elected training to make sure that our folks who are coming into city government know what they need to know. And so we looked at this as to how it could be a new opportunity for us to look at how we do our training, similar to what I was just discussing. And so what we are planning on doing is shifting our newly elected training into kind of 3 segments. So instead of getting everyone in a room one day or 2, during 2 days and giving them the fire hose, we are proposing 3 slightly smaller hoses. So the first will be the newly elected craft course that we always do, but it's going to be a little shortened. And that will be on December 9th and 16th. One will be in person at the trust, the other will be completely online. That will focus on your basics of what you essentially need to know the moment you step in office. So that is going to be ethics, that's going to be OPMA, grandma, and budgeting, because that's all going to start the minute you get into City Hall. From there, we are looking at doing some online trainings in January. Oh, and pardon me, a quick intro to land use within that. In January, we're gonna dig in a little more with some webinars that are going to focus more on land use more in depth. And then as well on the legislature. There will be two types of the legislature. One will be very basic of how a bill becomes a law, how to track a bill, how to contact a legislator, those things. The second component will be how to engage with the league, right? What do you do as a member of the League of Cities and Towns during the session? How do you engage with us? What meetings are we having? Everything like that. So that will hopefully give folks a primer to run into the session. After that, yes.
Just, this seems really odd to say, but as I've been talking with people who are newly running, not necessarily in my city, but other small cities who are asking me for advice, I'm really surprised at how many people don't realize that a city is a political subdivision. And I think that we need to bring that out a little more before we talk about legislative items, because they're not understanding that partnership and that what the state does, we have to do. And so I think it seems like it's a no-brainer for all of us who've been involved for a long time, but sometimes people run because they're angry about something and they really don't understand the process. So I would suggest that we put that,
I think that's
a little bit more.
Yeah, and I think I think we're planning, but I will make sure that we incorporate that in that really fundamental December crash course of you are a political subdivision of the state.
Yeah.
That's helpful to know. Thank you.
Or Molly, if we just concentrate on re-election, that'll make your training easier.
Retention was definitely. So going from that, and then this will also kind of flow a little bit into our third bullet point up there. What we're planning on doing is then after session, doing some regional events throughout the state. And so that will also dovetail with LAA, Local Administrative Advisor Grant we have. But we would like to be going around to each AOG with our staff and be conducting additional training. And so it will give us an opportunity to get into the community, to train a little bit more in depth on issues that our newly elected may need to know, but also what our cities and towns without administrators may need to know, or legislative updates. And that really serves three kind of purposes for us. One, we want to make sure that we are able to go out and physically connect, right, face to face with these newly elected folks and build that relationship. We also want to make sure that we are getting out in the field with the Local Administrative Advisor Program. And then finally, and this ties into the next, 2024 will be a 2-day annual convention rather than a 2.5-day annual convention. And so the thinking is as well that we can kind of take that half day to our members. Annual and mid-year are great, but it's not something that's necessarily accessible to all of our members. And so we want to make sure that we have an opportunity to engage with them. Even, we want them to be coming to our conventions, but even if that's something they're not able to do, we can go out and be connecting with them. And so essentially, we're bringing that half day to them. And it'll be a portion of the Local Administrative Advisor, a portion of the newly elected training, and a portion of the standard league legislative updates, trainings, and networking. Any questions with any of those shifts? All right, excellent. Then the next two are pretty easy. So we're going to be updating the website with our new board. So if we do not already have your photo and bio, please get that to us. You can email it to Cassidy Hanson, or we'll follow up with you after the board meeting as well to give you that contact info. And then additionally, we drafted and sent out a press release after annual announcing the new board. We circulated that with all of the major kind of news outlets. But if there are any specific news outlets that are within your region or your municipality, and you'd like to send it to them, we're happy to get you a copy of that so you can send that out. And so if that's something you'd like to do, just let me know. All right, that's everything I have. Thank you.
This little press packet was great. Really helpful. Okay, so do you need to take any action on this? All right, let's go ahead. Thanks, Molly. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the advocacy report and strategy for UEOC. And there's a lot of people on this one. Let's start. Oh, number one, I'll start. Legislative leadership meeting report. So I'll go first. I just wanted to give you a quick update that as soon as I was elected as the president, I had text President Stuart Adams probably 48 hours before that and said, hi, I'm going to be the new president. Is there any time we could meet? And he said, absolutely, let's meet on this day at this time. So that was the last day of the convention. And so I did have to slip out a little early and I went up to the Capitol. It was a fascinating day to be there because they were hosting 33 Senate presidents from around the country. So there was a lot of people walking through and meeting a lot of people. And I was scheduled for an hour with him and went into 90 minutes. He was really generous with his time and kind and excited and wanting to work together and collaborate. One of my takeaways and that we discussed was, can we get around the table prior to session? I always feel like session starts and then the ball starts rolling and they're saying, well, why didn't you tell us? You guys didn't like this. So he was all about that and even offered to form a meeting. Cam knows the heavy hitters that are going to be in that meeting, and there'll be Senate President Adams, myself, Cam, and then he's bringing some people that will be able to discuss affordable housing and what it looks like and discuss some of the bills that they're thinking. And we're just going to have I called it a listen and learn, and he loved that because we are there to listen and learn what they're thinking is behind these bills before the session starts. So we will get that set up. It was interesting. I guess they heard I was in the Capitol. Who's they, right? But all of a sudden, House Speaker Brad Wilson came running into President Adams' house office and said, Mayor Kaufusi, you're here. I said, I am. And he said, come over to my office as soon as you're done. So it was really lucky for me because I was able to knock both those out. And now with all the exciting things happening for Brad, we're all really excited for him. It was not a waste of a meeting, but we will see him pass the baton and then I'll go after the new guy and get in his office. And he was really agreeable. It was fascinating. He talked about his listen and learn tour he was on. I'm sure he came and visited with many of you mayors and spent time as he did with me. He said, I'm going to tell representatives and senators, it was the most learning and engaging thing. And I wish I had done it the first month I was elected to the Senate, to the House. Because he said, I really got to hear boots on the ground and what's going on in the cities. And again, you know me, I'm just like hitting them over the head with local control, leave us alone. And it worked because like, Mayor, we know you've said it like 3 times now, but I really do believe in that. So anyways, I thought it was really successful. We've got, I feel like we've got some good momentum on our side. They gave me their staff cell phones, their cell phones. So if we need to, they said, you know, even if you're up at the Capitol and the league doesn't like something, don't hesitate to reach out. So we will not, we will act on that. Then that's all I've got for now. Let's turn some time over to Beth for a quick update. You're on the agenda, so, or Kate, I'm sorry, Kate.
Before we turn it over to Kate, I want to thank Mayor Kaufusi because I did give her permission to leave early that Friday. So she did ask, and I said, if you've got one-on-one time for an hour with the Senate President, you don't turn that down. So thank you for being willing to do that. And we chatted before she went up, and we have other legislative meetings on the docket with the league officers the next few weeks that Justin will talk about in a second. But thank you for those meetings. And then Kate, do you want to give a quick update on a couple of your meetings? And then we'll come to Justin to frame the policy discussion for the next hour.
I really want to leave time for Justin. I mean, we have some meetings coming up on the agenda, but then we've also got, well, there's so much coming up with the legislature and UEFC. So which in particular do you want me to cover?
Well, just that you have meetings with Senate President and Speaker recently.
That's true.
Where they.
I have so many meetings, Cam.
Yeah,
which meetings?
Yeah, meetings for the sake of meetings, for the sake of meetings.
Yeah.
Just a quick snapshot on
I think
what you heard there.
the most important highlight I'd mentioned is in recent meetings with Speaker Wilson and with Representative Schultz in particular on issues involving housing before UEOC. The question was asked, you know, what do you see coming up of the various things that are working through the subgroups? And the most important takeaway from the meeting was that the report from those two leaders was, and most importantly, coming from Representative Schultz, since we assume he will be the speaker, is that they felt like there was a need to pause on housing, that there had been a lot that had come through. They recognized it. They recognized that it needed time to be implemented and then time to bear fruit. And so that was incredibly refreshing.
So many high fives. at that right now.
Incredibly refreshing to hear. I mean, that's the
Around the
result
room.
of many meetings you have done, staff have done. I just got to be there to hear that reported. I think there's also in particular from President Adams, similar to your meetings, he was very interested in continuing to meet. He immediately wanted to, schedule follow-up meetings and report back meetings. I think we have some continued work to do on the Senate side to get them to that same place that the House is in.
That's some in the House are in.
The some in the House are in. That the leadership reported, that they feel like there's been a lot done and they need to let it bear fruit. That they can't just keep changing it and then saying we haven't done anything if we haven't ever had a chance to move something through ordinance and then wait to see if the development community and the housing markets respond to those changes. So the Senate President wasn't quite as on that bandwagon as that meeting with Speaker Wilson and Representative Schultz, but that was an incredibly positive update.
Representative Musselman is a team player on this, and he's out the last two events I've been out with him, even at Water School last week. He stood up and talked about it and said, we talked a lot about this at UEOC. He's really advocating for taking a step back and giving time for things to bear fruit, and he's being really vocal about it, which is good. And Senator Wilson,
Yeah.
he was there hearing it too. They were sitting next to each other, so we had a chance to talk about it a little bit.
That's a credit to the work that has been done by all of us, basically to take stock and, we have worked for data collection legislation, which we need to see what's going on. And then the other thing I would say kind of in the same vein, and I think you're going to talk about the governor's press conference too, which is encouraging, but I did get a chance to talk to the governor at the convention, and he committed to take some time and go with me and Dawn and look at some of the things that have been happening that we can drive to within like a 3-hour window. He promised to give us 3 hours, and which is significant for him, I think. But to go around and just drive around and show him some of the things that are actually happening in the housing, arena in least Salt Lake, kind of what we can get to within 3 years to go to 2 or 3 different spots. But that's encouraging, and I also think that maybe he's getting that message too. So
Perfect. Well, while these meetings were happening in Salt Lake, Mayor Shepherd, you and Carson were with the National League of Cities last week. Do you want to take just 2 minutes, give an update from what you heard there? And then Justin, we'll go to you to frame what the governor said and the timing. And Nick, in a moment, I'll have you go to the Chart of Utah's growth legislation document too.
Yeah, this was our fourth convening. Previous discussions or convenings have dealt with construction and finance. This was on policy. Good input from all over the country on as to what's working and where. We're already there. In fact, as Carson and I talked, the things that they're bringing up, we're thinking we've already done that. Which is why we're seeing the housing growth still happen in Utah and more housing come online, and really why we're going to have a legislature say, let's pause for a bit because they see things happening. Probably the most concerning, I would say, but for everybody was having Arlington come in. Arlington just passed their legislation 6 months ago for their city that allows, they have 6 areas that are single family housing zoned only, single family detached, and open every single one of them for up to 6 units. And so you can tear down a house and build a 6-plex in any single family zone in the entire city. Absolutely scary. And their public hearing on it went for 2 days. And probably everybody in that city showed up for 2 days, and they allowed them X amount of time to speak, but they said it was really a 50-50 on for and against, and so they went forward with it. And they're now being sued, but still 100% committed to it. They've got, I think they said 19 applications already for but in talking to our colleagues that were there after the meeting and looking at their faces during the meeting, it was really a whole view of what the heck are you thinking? Because there's so many holes, so many holes and so many problems that you just look at, and they've done it with the intent of diversifying, of diversity and equity, and saying that if you got a 1/4 acre lot, well, there's no reason you should not be able to put a sixplex on there.
Which state is that?
Virginia.
Virginia.
So it's the city, not the county.
Yeah, it's the county, excuse me, it's Arlington County.
Okay, Arlington County.
Yeah.
That's a suburb of Washington DC.
Yeah.
It's a big,
And it's a big, yes.
It's big. So anyhow, great meetings, great information. We should have some, after our November meeting, at National, we should have a toolbox, which is all we've been asking for, is just the one thing that came out of this meeting this last week was that one size does not fit all. And that there's no way on earth National could ever come through and say, Utah do this because Virginia did this. But they can say, here's what Virginia did, and here's some ideas you could consider, but certainly don't go forward with those because it was nuts.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor Carson. Anything you'd like to add? With him?
I concur with Mayor Shepherd, and I should recognize that he's been a huge leader in this space, a great proponent for local government. There's a number of other organizations on this. It's a joint effort by APA, the American Planning Association, and the National League of Cities. And there's quite a few people on that group who don't represent cities, who are pretty gun-ho on ending zoning in entirety. So having Mayor Shepherd there to be a voice of reason in the space has been really, really instrumental for us. Lots happening all around the country. I concur that Utah's, I think, been a leader in a lot of these policies, trying to find a good balance of preserving public input, coming up with good processes, and preserving local control. But there's lots of interest in looking at what other states are doing, and some of the concerning and even haphazard approaches that have just resulted in lawsuits in a number of other cities and states. So
It was good to have Carson there. He shared some good points of view from Utah as well. So it's good to have him there.
Did you say 6 units to the acre or 6 units per lot?
6 units per lot with parking of just as a total size.
Any size?
Because any size. Any size. If it's single family zone, now mind you, the average sales price in Arlington is $2.1 million. That's the median priced home.
and I think the lots are probably.
No, they're 1/4 acre lots.
Yeah, they're 1/4 acre.
Yeah, it was, when I asked him about parking and how they do it, we said, well, how did you deal with parking? And he said, well, they went with, if you're near transit, so within a 1/4 mile of transit, they gave you a half a space per unit. If you're anywhere else outside of that, it's 1 space per unit. So you had to have 6 spaces period of parking for a sixplex. Yeah, it was,
They don't plow snow in Arlington, Virginia.
yeah, because they actually said, we have lots of street parking. And I asked the guy afterwards, well, how many people are parking on the street in those neighborhoods right now? Because I pull up Google Maps or Google Earth and there's nobody on the streets. And that was what he said was, well, really nobody. I said, so you took a single family, multi-million-dollar house development or neighborhood and said, you can build a sixplex here? And I asked him how many people had moved, if they checked with the realtors to see what the sales have looked like in those areas. And he said, oh, it's way too early to tell if they're moving at, at this point, if that's their reason. I mean, no one, he says, is going to move just because they approved a sixplex next door. Oh, no, that is when we do move it, because we don't want to live next to it, and we don't want, those people want to buy a house that's not next to one. So
part of the reason we asked for the framing is the term du jour right now is zoning reform.
Yep.
And part of the reason we sent Carson out to the National League of Cities event, part of the reason we're going to be hosting actually a bunch of state leagues around the country next month here in this office is to talk through what's been working here to preserve local control, but also to plan for a variety of housing types and plan for plan for growth in a responsible way. The governor had his press conference last week, which was really interesting, his monthly press conference. Justin, you want to just take a minute and summarize that and then kind of our upcoming schedule, and then we'll jump into the strategic discussion.
Yeah, so I think I'm gonna talk about the schedule first, and then come back to the governor's comments, because there is some overlap there. For new board members or for people who have just been so afraid to ask for the last couple of years, UEOC is the Unified Economic Opportunity Commission. The UEOC is chaired by the governor. The Speaker of the House sits on it. The President of the Senate sits on it. Other legislators, staff from the governor's office, other stakeholders from the community. Mayor Ramsey is our appointee to the UEOC. And the UEOC is really a unique process that brings stakeholders together outside of the regular interim legislative process. Now, depending which side you sit on of your opinion here, there's some real pros and cons to this. The pros are there are a lot of groups and subgroups that meet in non-public meetings, which means people can be very blunt about what they say. They don't have to posture in the way they may in some interim meetings. And so we take some of these ideas and flesh them out and hash them out, and then come back to the full UEOC for approval. Now, if you're someone who isn't in those meetings, then it's not an open and public meeting and you're missing out on some of that discussion. Luckily, we are in far too many of these meetings. We spend a lot of time looking at Carson and Cam, and we're mentally calculating how often we're in UEOC meetings, and it's like every day between one of us. But when the governor says we're going to bring something back to the UEOC, it's important because that group will vet some of these ideas. They'll look at these ideas before it gets into any kind of open meeting. And then when we get to those UEOC meetings, they present them at a very high level. And then those things then have to get taken and drafted as legislation. So the reason we put all these dates and deadlines on the calendar is because these UEOC meetings matter a great deal. So today, obviously meeting with the board, meeting with LPC. October 10th and 11th, we'll have legislative interim meetings, and those are regular legislative interim meetings. We will start seeing some bills, particularly funding requests, pop up in those meetings that have come through the UEOC. And then the Land Use Task Force, again, for those who are new, Land Use Task Force it's an internal group where we meet with the Property Rights Coalition, the housing advocates, realtors, and that's where we hash out a lot of our ideas internally, find some kind of middle ground on some issues. But so Land Use Task Force, it's not a legislative task force, it's our own task force where we hash through a lot of these ideas. On October 13th, the Commission on Housing Affordability will be meeting. The Commission on Housing Affordability, or CHA for short, deals with all the housing issues. They sit under the umbrella of the UEOC. They used to be their own independent thing, but any of those CHA items has to go to the UEOC and then to an interim committee or to the legislature to be dealt with. So if you need a primer on this, grab me later. I can walk you through more of it. Finally, we meet again on the 16th for LPC, so we're back together in just 3 short weeks. But you can see there are a lot of those meetings that are coming up in between that time. So the governor's comments are interesting because he did mention, one, that we do need to see what's working. He recognizes there's things we've done in the last few years, and we need to get the data and find out what is actually working. I will say to Kate's comment earlier, I don't know that the governor has quite the patience that we're hearing from the House at this point. I think it's correct. The Senate is not in the exact same place the House may be yet. I think Speaker Wilson and soon to be Speaker Schultz are in a slightly different mindset. And we have work to do to show them what we have done so far, and then we do need to give time for that to work. That being said, I do think the governor is looking for something or multiple things that he can point to in a press conference that are quick and easy to understand for the public to say, this is what we did on housing. If you look at water over the last couple of years, there's some very specific things that have been done on water: secondary water metering, agricultural innovation, landscaping things, turf buyback. There's really quick, simple talking points the governor can say, here's what we're doing on water. Housing, we have done a lot of things, but it's important to know that we have not done anything that's a quick soundbite. We have done very technical things, changing subdivisions, station area plans. We've done a lot of things that, you know, some of us in the room understand. But they're not also things that are quick to point to. So while I agree that the House understands some of this, we have some work to do to let the governor know what we've done and then to help him take that message back. So, and Mayor, one second, I'll get there. We've got some upcoming meetings with all of these groups. So that's the last thing I want to point out is, so we're meeting with the Senate President on Wednesday. So we have a chance to get back in there and talk to him. So the 27th, meeting with House leadership and the governor's office both on the 10th of October. So there's a lot going on in the UEOC in the next few weeks. We have meetings with them, and that's our opportunity to take these messages and then help them understand what we've been doing.
Just the one message to drive with them, and we discussed it back in DC, is financing right now is absolutely horrible. So for builders to go out, nobody's building. I mean, it is, you know, single home developments have just dramatically dropped because the money is so unbelievably expensive to get right now that nobody wants to build, and they've got to understand that yes, we've stuck these things in place and they're going to be looking for results, but there are no, the results will have to take some time.
Yes.
That we've got 1,100,000 lots that have been entitled or processed throughout the state that can't be built right now because money just isn't available to do it. And there's nobody to buy it because rates are at a point right now where nobody is wanting to move.
Yeah.
And that's a huge problem. We had rates sitting at 3% forever. So if you bought or refinanced your house in the last few years, you're not moving. Unless you absolutely have to. And so until we free that up, it's just not going to change.
Yeah, fair.
So I was just going to say, I mean, we can talk about this, the UEOC and all these committees being an exhausting process and a lot of meetings and a lot of work. But, and we, I've talked before about how our legislature is kind of like not really a part-time legislature anymore because of all this activity. But I will say that, that our municipalities have made progress because we're at the table in these meetings, unlike things before. And I think at this point, big housing legislation isn't going to get traction in the legislature without going through this process. And so we have shoehorned our way into having input on this stuff, and we're helping the legislature avoid a lot of bad consequences as a result of that. And even though, sometimes I think our membership may wonder like why we're compromising on some things, we're actually fighting a good fight, and and being at the table is making a difference in terms of making good policy and housing for our state.
So I think to jump on that, the final framing thing, all that, Kim and Jared, and I'll let you guys jump in. There are some things we can do around the edges, and there's some things that we can do that can be presented as big wins. Even if we've done some of the biggest work we've already done, and now it's a question of, it's more optics. Can they say, we've done this and this is a big deal for these reasons? And so from our this is just from the political mindset, we want to make sure that we are negotiating where we can, and we're pushing back where we need to. But if there's solutions we can find that aren't huge, aren't going to be huge gifts for us, but there are things that we can do that will help move things along. I think that's what the governor and other people are looking for, is what are things we can point to that we're doing, that we're continually doing, even if from our perspective, we can say, we've done a lot of the big stuff, and let's let those big things go.
So that's a perfect segue then to the direction we need from you over the next 50 minutes or so. Nick, will you in the board packet skim down to the, that one. So this is a document that was distributed at the Legislative Growth Summit last week. So almost every legislator got a copy of this document. Outside of that room, you're now the first people to see this document. The league had some input on this document demonstrating the quantity of bills that have passed in recent years related to growth. And you can see it, taking that middle section, transportation, housing, and land use, how many documents or how many bills have passed in this general space. This is part of the message we're delivering, but as Justin indicated, the audience the audience response has varied from governor's office that still wants aggressive action on housing. In fact, his press conference, he referenced housing policy more than anything else other than maybe homelessness. So even though they didn't get the headlines that some of the other comments did, those are the two items that he referenced the most. To what Mayor Kafusi and Councilmember Bradshaw reported back of where leadership is. And then in terms of rank and file legislators, truly it's all over the map. As we've had conversations with them, and then as we got reports back from their Growth Summit last week, there was a lot of spirited discussion among legislators in that meeting about what the next step should be to facilitate more starter homes and to facilitate more affordable home ownership. So the good news is, as they're talking about facilitating affordable home ownership, that's consistent with the board principles that you adopted a few months ago. How we get there is what's still up in the air. So we're going to go to our first strategic question for this group. Nick, can you slide over to my PowerPoint? And we are going to be doing a combination of actual votes and Slido in this meeting. Okay, so just so everybody's aware, in a moment, I'm going to turn it over to Jared to walk through modular housing. But this is what we've heard from state leaders. How do we collectively produce more starter homes? That term zoning reform that I referenced, and Mayor Shepherd gave that example of Arlington. Arlington's not alone. We're seeing a lot of those conversations happening around the country. Salt Lake County is going to be hosting a zoning reform event in November. This term's come up repeatedly at the Commission on Housing Affordability. I would argue and have argued back in that meeting, as has Mayor Silvestrini and others, that the changes we've made in the land use processes the last couple of years are an effort to improve the land use efficiency, and ideally in the outcome result in better planning outcomes and reduced cost of housing. The second one, infrastructure costs, is a really important one. Mayor Shepherd referenced that builders aren't getting financing, but part of what they're not getting financing for right now is for infrastructure. So there's a lot of really positive dialogue happening right now with legislators and the governor's office about whether the state can fill some of this infrastructure role and finance infrastructure, whether it's infill to facilitate housing or greenfield or rural Utah to facilitate housing. And then, of course, that main point of let enacted bills work. And again, you can see some of the main points that we've been using. And it was great to hear the governor reference some of these points in his press conference last week. So he was very positive. We're going to be thanking his staff when we talk to their staff later this afternoon, because it was very collaborative. The governor was also saying we have to keep being aggressive. So that's the
Couple with that, on the 19th in the press conference, he spoke on some affordable housing projects that Ivory Innovations is going to be doing. On the 19th, he just really hit the nail hard that it comes down to supply and demand. We know how economics works. It's supply and demand. We have to increase supply. We've heard that before, but that was his message 2 days ago.
Yep, agreed. That's been a constant refrain from the governor. So Nick, on the next slide, you'll see part of a statement that the UEOC actually endorsed last week that we provided input on. And really the gist of this statement, we gave it to you word for word, but it was the acknowledgement that we need to allow bills that have been passed to actually be implemented. But it also still keeps the door open for additional policy ideas. But we thought this was an important step that the UEOC endorsed last month. Wow, time flies. Feels like last week. Okay, next slide, Nick. We're going to be asking you a Slido question about this slide. These are different ideas that have come up just since our last board meeting. Now, some of them aren't necessarily new, but they've come up since our last board meeting. So at our last board meeting, you voted to give staff direction to engage in the modular housing space. And Jared's got a report back for you, and we'll be taking additional vote on modular specifically because we've been working through a lot of policy and technical challenges over the last 3 weeks. But these are all ideas that have come up in different contexts. I will quickly read them, and then we're going to ask you a Slido question, 2 Slido questions, to identify the 4 items that you would be most comfortable with and the 4 items that you find most concerning. Right, Carson? That's the framing of the question. Again, what that'll help us with is knowing that this board won't meet until after the next Commission on Housing Affordability meeting. We want to be able to relay back to our representatives there that if the conversation goes this way, that we can be supportive of those concepts. If the conversation goes that way, our folks have concern about those concepts. So you'll be highlighting the top 4, and then we also have some LPC survey results that fill in here. So again, these are ideas that either came up with legislators last week, or they've come up in other conversations. So the state prohibiting zoning for less than 2 units per acre. So in other words, a state cap on zoning. So now nothing can be zoned greater than 2 units per acre. State mandating all types of ADUs as permitted uses. State mandating duplexes or triplexes as permitted uses in residential zones. State mandating that X% of residential zones must include small lots or duplexes. This is getting to the missing middle concept. One thing you're going to be seeing as different data sets are coming out. Remember, we had Envision Utah present to this board twice over the summer. Part of their recommendation, when that report is done in the next couple of weeks, is that their analysis shows that the majority of cities are not allowing for small lots or duplexes in residential areas. And that's one of their recommendations, is that cities need to open up their zoning. Our pushback on that is that cities actually are allowing a lot of smaller lots. Our data shows that, often though it's through a development agreement or something similar, but it may not be in the base zoning. And so, you know, this concept is really trying to get to base zoning rather than through development agreement.
Yeah, and I push back a little bit comments when you talk about that. Is like, what are the sample cities that they looked at, and how are they distributed throughout the state? Because there are radical differences between urban and rural on that issue. And I until we see who they're talking about, I have real concerns about that.
It's number 5. I agree, Mayor Silvestrini. Mayor Silvestrini has pushed back in several of the meetings where this concept has come up. Well, really, concepts 1 through 4 have come up. Number 5, state capping the minimum lot size.
Minimum, would that be maximum?
So right now, often you'll have cities that will require lot size to be a certain minimum amount, so it would be dropping that.
Oh, got you.
Yeah. Number 6, assigning minimum base density. So the concept here is Cameron City would be assigned a certain density quota, and then it would be up to the city to figure out, do we do 10 units to the acre over here and 2 units to the acre over here to get to the average. Number 7, state definitions for residential setbacks.
Sorry, 6. Is that a California-based idea? I mean, isn't that what California is saying?
Sort of.
You need to, if you're San Diego, you've got to have X, and if you're LA, you've got to have Y, and if you're Carlsbad, you got to have Z based on your size.
More or less, the California model actually bases it on units. And we've successfully pushed back on the idea of minimum units, because we don't build units, we plan for it. So the response back was, hey, we hear you, you guys plan for it. So you need to plan for it whether the market builds it or not. Number 7, state definitions for residential setbacks. This one's come up quite a bit. We talked about this as a board a few months ago. Number 8, streamline regulations for modular homes. This is what Jared's going to go into in just a moment. Number 9, state definitions for garage size standards and single family units. We're also going to ask you Slido questions on that after Jared's presentation. But the concept here is, as we've had discussions with legislators about smaller houses, there's been pushback saying you have some cities that are requiring really large garages in single family houses, which then drives up the size of the overall house. So if the city could not require a garage larger than a certain size, that in turn would likely lead to a slightly smaller house. Most cities are actually in a pretty same space, but there are a handful of cities that are requiring much larger garages, attached garages as part of the single family piece. Or we also have had some cities that are not counting the garages as part of the parking minimums. So then requiring developers to find additional parking tools because they're not counting the garages. And again, as we're looking for different ways to say, here's how we're trying to support the construction of smaller homes, there's been a lot of focus on parking and garages. Number 10, this is dovetailed into what Mayor Shepherd was saying around state infrastructure funding, but there's been a lot of momentum around the idea of the state investing in infrastructure funding, whether it's for parking structures and infill development or utility infrastructure in greenfield development or in rural Utah that could facilitate additional housing units, but then having some criteria that infrastructure would need to support certain types of housing outcomes. For example, you could say that the housing outcome would need to have a certain number of units to the acre, or a certain percentage of them would have to be owner for sale product and not just rental product, or a certain percentage would be deed restricted for affordability purposes. But something where the state could offer a financial carrot, the local zoning and the local planning aligns with that carrot, and then the developer ideally could build the product that we all have said we wanted, which is an affordable home ownership piece. And then number 11, other ways to make land use processes faster, which is, and more, I shouldn't have put faster, should have been more efficient, which is similar to what we've done the last couple of years.
Just a question going back to the development agreements, because I think a lot of us are experiencing that, and it doesn't showcase your zoning changes, but it does indicate a lot of changes with regards to that particular development, smaller lot sizes and all those other things that are required. Now, how are we as a league then showcasing that we are doing things with development agreements that are in alignment, but not necessarily a change in zoning?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So Carson has been desperately trying to gather the data city by city. We presented this at the city managers conference, city managers business meeting during our conference, trying to gather the data to show the outcomes. And the outcome story is a good story to tell. The problem is the entities right now that are researching how does local land use affect affordability, they can't necessarily track down every development agreement and analyze it. So they're looking at the base zoning. We're getting the feedback from cities that we're doing this through development agreements, and that's leading to this question of should it always be done via development agreement, or should it be facilitated based zoning? And that is a legitimate policy question. So we're trying to fill in the gaps with the data, but that is a legitimate policy question. So we've given you this background. We're going to ask you right now via Slido to give the 4 that you're most comfortable with and the 4 you're least comfortable with. And then we're going to pivot. We limited it to 4 because we knew if we gave you more options, you'd take them. So let's do that, and then we'll pivot to Jared for in-depth analysis on where we're at on modular. So you can see the Slido info there.
You can either scan the QR code, or it might be easier at Slido.com than entering in the meeting ID. The first one's comfortable, and the second one will be concerned, as Ken mentioned.
We're not asking for support or oppose intentionally, because these aren't bills yet. Well, they're not bills yet, so you can't take a vote on a non-existent bill. We're trying to just get a sense of where folks are at, and often when we ask these questions, we get more nuanced results.
What if I can't come up with 4?
You're not required.
It means you don't care about housing.
Staff taken over under beforehand.
We have hunches.
Some of these are, if I have to give, I can give here, but I don't want to.
What's the purpose of the city again? I can't find it.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Martin.
My quick question is, when we're having all these discussions, I think a lot of cities realize there's a need for homeownership, but developers aren't wanting to bring us small houses.
Yeah.
They're wanting to bring us townhomes or apartments or things like that. And so is there a way to attach that as sort of, yeah, we're okay with small homes. We want homeownership to develop and to increase, but they're not bringing that to us. If we say we allow for more density, they want townhomes that they can all rent. So is there a way to
Yeah, amen. We have been preaching that message based on a lot of the data that Carson's gathered from cities.
Right, it's the definition of when we think of a starter home, we're thinking of a single family house that's smaller than what a lot of us live in, instead of home choices. Because the younger generation is looking at townhomes, condos, twin homes, maybe even the smaller cottage type homes, and not just your typical single family home with a lot. A lot of them don't want that lot, so it's more choices than just a single family home. That's how we think of starter home as a small detached house. And so that choice is really the difference. And also developers aren't willing to build them because of the liabilities they have on building some of these choices. So how do we, as a state, allow them to have that protection that they'd be willing to build that stuff?
Yeah, no, those are great points, and I am not at all surprised by the data here. We have 12 board members who responded. There are a few other board members here, but due to time, we're gonna close this in 10 seconds. So if you haven't finished it, please finish. So it doesn't surprise me that these ranked highly, and it's also why we're gonna have some follow-up side of questions on the top 3 that came out of here. But this is helpful.
The ones that started with mandate showed up.
Weird, right? But
I would,
go ahead, Mayor Walker, I think that was you.
well, yeah, I mean, I haven't been listening as closely as I should be, I apologize, but what about the concept of mandating a smaller home, like just zoning for a size of a structure? You know, a starter home size? How would they like that? I mean, like, if we're gonna, you know, if you want to have affordability, let's take a 1/4 acre lot, but limit the size of the structure. Because what they do in my city is they take a 1/4 acre lot or smaller and build 3-story, you know, $700,000 house on it.
Yeah.
What about limiting? Like, what would be the attitude or concept of, you know, they want us to give them what they want. Let's give them what they want. Let's make it, you know, you can't build a bigger home than 1,500 square feet. This is a starter home area.
I think that's spot on, Mayor. I think, you know, that's our problem right now is we're giving minimum lot sizes. We're giving a minimum thing. We need to tell them this is the biggest house you can build.
Right, I want to do that.
This size house and
Benefit.
it has, and this isn't the townhome. We're gonna give you 1/4, you know, or 1/10 of an acre lots, or, you know, whatever is on there, and we can give you these. But this is the biggest house you're building.
So Salt Lake City has,
Agreed.
Salt Lake City has a couple different sizes of single family zones. We have a 5,000 square foot zone and a 12,000 square foot zone, lots of single family. And we're looking at doing a study on what should that be? Can we go to 1? We're looking at the whole, the development agreement by zoning requirements, because we do a lot of these development agreements one-on-ones, and the next thing you know, you're spending so much time on just one lot, one zone thing. So we have a lot of.
You know, and if you limit the structure size, I mean, like on a 1/4 acre, you could say, okay, the biggest home you can build is 1,500 square feet, but you could do an external ADU for, 600 square feet, whatever it is, something like.
And that's also part of the discussion is the East Village, there's a base zone of 40% can be covered by structure.
Yeah.
Garage and everything else.
And I think it's just, that's it, we built this. Had a subdivision build, we did 10 of an acre lots, and they put in 3,000 square foot homes.
That's exactly what they do.
I think that's further evidenced by the push to narrow the building envelope, right, the setbacks. They're wanting to build bigger homes just on a smaller lot. The market wants a bigger than that.
Yeah,
really small lot.
because that's where they make money. I mean, they make the money on the bigger home. They don't make the money on the smaller home. So if they get a smaller lot, let's get a bigger home on that smaller lot. All we're doing as cities by doing that is reducing the cost of the land.
Exactly.
And taking that out of the equation, but then they just build a bigger house. And I mean, we did that. Well, in fact, I met with Destinations folks before I went to DC in the subdivision that they're building there, where we gave them 0 lot lines and said, this is awesome. So what's your price point? Because I toured the homes in there and they said, well, we're starting at 500 and most of them are at 550 to 6. It's like, okay, you have 0 lot lines. And they went this way and, vertical and built big homes. If you just keep them at 2 stories, then we would have done, I don't know.
Mayor Shepherd, I just wanted to ask, with that example in Arlington, was that local government decision or were they being pressed by county or?
Well, it is the county. So,
Arlington County.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's their choice.
But I will note, Councilmember, I'm glad you brought that up. There is a huge battle in the Virginia legislature right now over local control. So part of it is also local governments saying, we're going to go this direction to prevent the state mandate and control our destiny. And that's essentially what we're asking here is, over the next 3 weeks, some of these ideas are going to come up in meetings that several of us will be in. So that's why we wanted to make sure we had the quick snapshot here. Again, I'm not surprised by the results that we see on the screen here for both concerning and comfortable. let's focus on the comfortable piece. I think we've made really good arguments on the concern piece. Let's focus our next 40 minutes on the comfortable space. So Jared, you take about, we've got 40 minutes left. We're going to dedicate 20 minutes to the modular discussion and then 20 minutes to hit the remaining UEOC chop pieces, because there are also some appropriations requests there that we need your feedback on. So
I need to speak up for Jared goes. You're talking about developers not building the smaller homes. We don't require them. We don't make that in there. If I was a developer, I'm not, but I was like electrical contractor. If I could build that and sell one for 500,000 or build on the same lot and sell one for 200,000, I'm gonna go to 200,000. I'm gonna do what gives me the greatest return. My goal isn't to make less money. My goal is to make more money. And so all these things we're doing are reducing other things, but it's not reducing the physical size of the house. When I bought my first house, I had 8-foot ceilings. I had an unfinished garage. I had 2 bedrooms. That was after I lived in the 80s, by the way. I moved into it. And it was a small 2-bedroom house that I could afford. Now, the builder could have built a bigger house on that same lot. He could have built 10-foot ceilings. He could have put granite countertops in there. He could have put nicer kitchens in there, which would raise the price of the house, which they're still going to do. These things aren't solving what the real problem issue is.
and those are excellent points, Mayor. And we often, especially the first half of your point, like that's what we hear from the developers all the time is we still need to hit our ROI, and we, government shouldn't be clamping down on the ability of the market to produce housing. That's where we think there is a win-win space in the modular space, because modular could fundamentally change how the industry produces housing and could dramatically reduce cost and hopefully therefore price of housing. So when we met 3 weeks ago at the conference, you gave us the general direction to move forward. We have a couple of follow-up policy questions that were in the email we sent you Friday afternoon. Our apologies, this presentation here, you haven't seen these slides because they weren't in the packet, but Jared, take it away and we'll go for about 20 minutes on this topic to get the feedback we need.
Is this being shared? You are currently sharing.
Okay, so while they're working through that, the Commission on Housing Affordability co-chairs met with me last week when we were at the legislative intermeetings in St. George. They were both asking for updates on the modular space. The governor specifically referenced modular in his press conference as an area where he saw that there was a possibility for consensus. But there are some policy questions that we need to work through. Jared has met with state leaders as well as like the development community, trying to figure out how to bridge this gap, and that's why we're bringing it back to you. And it's around plan review and inspections, and who's responsible for what, state government or local government. So Jared.
Thank you. So you've given a good lead up into modular housing. To begin with, I wanted to just show you this picture.
Okay, so you're still sharing.
Yes.
Okay, we'll see if the video works.
If not, you can act it out.
Yes.
Too big.
Yeah, we'll leave that to you. Share.
I can act out.
There we go.
Okay, so, my question is, by the raise of hands, which one is modular? You're one left.
Oh, and vote.
Well, you gotta be difficult. I said one, but that's okay.
We got a left online, left.
Say right then.
Okay, so those that picked right and those that picked left. You just had to play it, didn't you? So,
My first exam.
not your first exam. I wouldn't ever call anybody out that they were wrong in this setting, so I figured, well, I'll put both out, okay? So it is amazing, these modular housing our modular homes are not your mobile homes, that, I think that sometimes the perception is that, modular housing is just mobile homes, not on, wheels. And so this kind of gives you a better idea of what that might look like in your city if, we go down that route. I wanted to show this to you. These are different methods of how different states approach modular housing. You'll notice that we're yellow, which is local plan review and local inspection. There's 11 total states that follow this model. And then the majority are those that do third-party plan review and third-party inspection. What third-party plan review, for those that aren't aware of what that might be, before it goes to construction, there are plans that are made and they're of the modular. There are plans that they have to say the soil is suitable for a certain modular, given the winters that we have, et cetera, et cetera. So right now, that plan review is being done through local plan review, municipal building inspectors, and planning departments. They review those plans, and then those plans currently are also inspected through municipal building authorities. With modular, it becomes a little bit more difficult. That construction is sent off-site, possibly to another state. There has been conversation of trying to entice and trying to get modular facilities more into Utah, so that we're bringing jobs into Utah, and that is also being discussed. So you should know that as well. The third-party inspection aspect of it would be, and let me kind of explain how that happens. Let me just come to this, and we'll discuss what that third-party agency actually does within the manufacturing facility. The first part of the modular space is that third-party agencies and the quality control, as well as the actual third-party inspectors, are all need to be certified and approved through the state. The state keeps a list of those that have been approved and those that are licensed and know Utah building code. And what that looks like specifically for Utah. Obviously, a Florida modular is going to look very different than what is in Utah. And I can send these to you. This is just you're not supposed to read this. I mean, you can. I can send this to you. I can barely read it with glasses up close. So that was not the point. The point was to show you how many qualifications these third-party agencies, as well as the inspectors, and there's a whole nother section for quality control of the manufacturing facilities. And so I just wanted to show you kind of, this is what, it's a pretty rigorous qualification process that they have to go through. And once they've been qualified and licensed, then the state keeps those names and they're able to inspect modular housing within out-of-state facilities. And this is only off-site inspections, this third-party inspection aspect of it. And I just want to kind of come back to this map. You'll notice that, so what we are, what has been in the proposals is that we remain with the local plan reviews. So the planners would see it, they would approve it, and those plans would then go to the manufacturing facility. At the manufacturing facility, that's when the quality control and the third-party agencies and inspectors would do their work on the inspections out of state. when it comes back into state and they're assembling the modulars, that is when the on-site municipal building authority or inspectors would do the inspections on site for the foundation, for the assembly. If there's any damage that happened during transportation, all of that. So all of the on-site inspections would still happen with municipal building inspectors. So we are in essence, I did want to just show you this because in essence, we are creating some sort of a new category than what has been used elsewhere in the states. We would be advocating or proposing, and this is what has been in the negotiations, is that the local plan review and then third-party inspections. So I wanted to at least show you that is, and frankly, I should say this too, that these categories, while the authority lies with these categories don't always line up when you get down into the code for each individual state, because there's so many different ways to do it. So while there's 7 categories on here, once you get down into the nitty-gritty of the code, it looks a lot more varied. So while we would be creating a new category, we would also, that's okay, because so many have different ways of handling the third-party inspection. For example, the state might give the third-party inspection the authority, and in code, it might also give the authority to the local building inspectors based on if the modular is manufacturing facility is within the county and only sends off a certain number of modules. And so splitting it out into code, it becomes a lot more nuanced and detailed than this 7. But I did want to give you this picture, overall picture of what it looks like across the country.
So I'm trying to repeat that. So the third-party inspection, this is for out-of-state modular builders.
Let me say this, off-site.
Off-site. Okay, that was my question. So off-site, because we have a facility here that builds them off-site in our city. So that would still be a third-party inspector at the commercial and the residential?
Yes.
Commercial and residential?
Well, right now, all that's we're discussing right now is residential.
Yeah, I figured that was pretty much.
There hasn't been.
I can't imagine how much commercial would be there. So off-site, okay, that's a good keyword there, because the concern we have is that the city still be liable if it was off-site but in our city,
right,
compared to off-site in Wyoming.
Right.
Okay.
So it would be off-site in the state, in your county, in your city, or in Texas.
And the manufacturer would be the one who would be footing the bill for that.
Third-party inspector.
Third-party inspection, right, okay.
And they would need to use one of the certified licensed inspection agencies that the state has already certified. Right. Per Utah.
And I can't imagine how many, there'd be an overwhelming need for a lot of inspectors, but I also want to make sure that the whole idea of the timeline, you know, hey, I want you to inspect my houses. Well, you're number 10 on my list and we'll get you to in 2035. Not
Right.
2024.
You're talking about the third-party inspection.
Yeah, just their timeline that they're required to do this.
So let me get into that, because I get into that a little bit.
And that's really.
But I think that's a good question to ask, and I'll get a little bit more into that, of what that actually looks like in the facility a little bit later. Mayor.
I can save my question for when we're talking about strategy. I just can't help but wonder what the feedback is right now from the development community looking at this. What are all of the home developers in the state of Utah thinking about this, going, wait, the heck, you know, wait a minute, you know, in the name of affordable housing, we don't actually love that idea, you know? And so I just wondered, so that's something I just want us to talk about, but anyway.
I think you should just answer it now.
Yeah. So, the response has been an overwhelming support for modular housing because to them, going back to Mayor Shepherd, it reduces their costs of manufacturing a facility in the manufacturing process. They're not importing materials in, but they can take care of that all on the floor, the manufacturing floor. Everything happens all at once, all at the same time. Versus having this bill and then having the electrical come in, you know, and then having the plumbing come in and then, but it's all right there.
So if this, my apologies for my lack of making sure that I thoroughly understand this. I do want to thoroughly understand it. If we, I know the conversations we've had so far, if we as a state, we as a league support and as a state, we go to, we're going to approve modular housing and we're going to set up, you know, protocols for it. Then the large home builders in the state, and even some of the small ones, who knows, but picture some of the largest home builders in the state, they can say, okay, we're going to transition to that right away. We're going to start building modular housing and we're going to hire these companies to work with us to build it offsite, but it's still the Ivory, or it's still going to be whoever, Destiny, whatever, you know, whoever, they can build them, they can just do it that way.
Correct.
That's what we're talking about. Okay.
And you're not gonna bring everybody along with that, because not everybody's gonna
Right.
have the ability to do that, or they'll have to figure that out as a new business model, but there seems to be interest in this in the development community.
Okay, I just wondered what the development community was saying, so this is helpful to know.
No, this-
That you're going through this, it's just helpful to know what the collective.
I should say this, that modular is already being used in Utah. So it's not like modular hasn't been used in Utah. It's
nothing new, it's just.
make
it more effective.
Make it more effective by having these third-party agencies do the inspections offsite. And
That's what it's.
that's what this does, is it streamlines the process. Instead of having each individual city have each individual code of their qualifications for the third-party inspections, for the quality control, and having, you know, however many cities have different codes that each third-party agency has to abide by, that this would be saying, look, the state through the code has set up these parameters that in order for you to be a third-party agency, you have to abide by. And that way, the manufacturing facility hires out the third-party agency. And I'll get into what they actually do and what they don't do. Just a little
Basically,
bit
just
later.
adding it as another tool if they choose to. No one's coming asking us to build modular housing in our city.
Right, right.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I guess if we did what Mayor Walker had said about minimum lot size and minimum house size, this would be a better alternative for those developers who might lose money on a smaller house for that lot size, because they could go with the modular and still make money.
It would be another tool.
In West Jordan, we do have that, like Salt City does, there is a company that builds these larger homes. But I'm concerned that we're separating commercial from residential. I think those should follow the same rules.
Well, and that's something that we can,
For
we can,
inspections or whatever, they should
Right.
have a separate set of rules, they should follow the same thing. It's still a building that needs to be safety codes.
and not to say that that wouldn't be involved in the discussion. I can just say that it hadn't been yet. It's been mainly focused around affordable housing instead of affordable commercial building.
Because this company I talked about, in West Jordan, they also build commercial buildings, you know, like the shack out.
Right.
Scary sports, and like that.
So, yeah, so that is the first part. The second part, is manufacturing process, in the manufacturing facility. I wanted to, let's see if this works.
Some robotics to maximize living costs and create cities of affordable housing. High quality, just getting started. Solution years. Build affordable housing measure needs on RS-75. Units to the property where the building is assembled and completed.
So
So is your microphone.
there's still an echo. Kill your microphone. There you go. Thank you. There you go. So to get into what it looks like, as far as inspections go, and we have some slide of questions here at the end that are important to us to get your feedback on, related to third party and quality control. The quality control department of the manufacturing facility inspects every single modular, that every single piece of every single modular home they inspect, and they say, is it according to the plans? Is it according to, code? And they review that. The third party agencies and inspectors that go in do spot checking on those modulars at various phases of what, say, the electrical part of that phase. They review the electrical and say, okay, on this modular, there was deficiencies in this, or, yep, you followed your processes, you followed your procedures, you followed what the plans say, and then they'll go to another part of the manufacturing process and say, okay, you've done plumbing in this. This meets code, it meets the plan. And so this third party agencies are a spot check, a evaluation, and so both of them have to be licensed and approved through the state. So that's how the third party agencies and let's see if I can. That's what you see. This is the next. So we've already gone over that. The next one is, oh, did I? No.
Nick, I got a point I wanted to make. Look, if we're gonna go this direction with these private inspectors, I just want the liability pushed onto them. I want the consumer to have someone to sue when it goes south, if it does. So maybe if we go this direction, we work in large bond requirements and make sure that a consumer's got a place to go.
Right, and I'm glad you brought that up. I was going to cover that as well. In fact, that's one of the slide of questions. But with issuing a CFO, certificate of occupancy, where the municipal building authority or inspector is saying, yep, it's suitable to be inhabited and you can live in this. We're proposing, and part of the negotiations, some of those concepts of having a limitation of liability in the CFO that would essentially absolve municipal inspectors from anything that happened prior to the beginning of the assembly on site. Meaning transportation, meaning the third-party inspectors, the electrical, the plumbing, whatever they couldn't see and inspect, that would be limited to what they can inspect. So I'm glad you brought that up. We are, that is part of the discussion. because that is an important part of, making sure that we all feel comfortable, particularly with the liability.
So Jared, question I have is, they're gonna be state certified inspectors, but they're going to be paid and employed, I presume, by the manufacturer, which I think puts a conflict of interest in there. What if we just have whatever municipality that building is being built in, like I said, this is Salt Lake City or West Jordan or, you know, Cameronville, and that inspector works for that city, but goes over there on a daily basis or a regular basis, whatever the need is, like inspections that way, so we don't have that conflict of interest.
So that would work if the manufacturing facility was in-state in your city. But if it's in Texas,
That's,
that would be, I mean, I would be fine to go to Florida or Hawaii, but, I don't think that that's gonna work. So, that's why that's the model that's generally used across, the country. I have brought up that concern.
Jared, we need to include, in this negotiations, we need to have some amendments to the Governmental Immunity Act to specifically give us liability protection.
Yeah.
If stuff is inspected off-site by not our inspectors, that we're immune from suit on that.
Yep. So then it's transported, it's assembled and installed on site, and the municipal building inspectors look at that. We would like your feedback at this point.
what was the other picture I just missed?
Well, we know that there's a little bit of exhaustion with Slido, so.
Okay.
Can I just add, I think my.
exhausted.
No.
Yeah, I don't think it's Slido's fault.
I just add for me, when I was reading up on this and reaching out to my development services department, we all agreed that the devil is in the details on this.
It is. It is. Yep.
Jared, help me understand where the gaps in liability are. As I look at the state code and immunity today, we have really strong immunity for certificates of occupancy as well as inspection.
There are.
So
There are, it would be a suspender and bootstraps and suspender, when that language would be on the C of O.
to me, it seems like the bigger issue probably isn't as much the liability for what reasons you just stated, but more on the conflict of interest of maybe internal inspecting as well as the lack of somebody that they can turn to tomorrow if the inspectors, if that company goes out of business, they don't have, my residents tomorrow don't have somebody that they can go to like they might be able to go to the city that has.
The main thing is just ensuring that the quality is there, so we don't get a bunch of junk built that it becomes a liability for the whole community later when it starts deteriorating.
Exactly.
Do you think, Jeff, I've been concerned about making sure this isn't a deteriorating product as well. I've been curious whether it's a question of its inspection and construction or an erosion of building codes at a different level.
Well, and that's, I mean, I'm sure the devil's in the details about things like that, but like, in Florida, they're gonna go for hurricane safety. Here, we gotta make sure that snow loads are adequate, right? There are differences in that, but I think we can solve that as long as the inspection regime recognizes that and is certified to meet our code, our building, state building code.
And that they are incentivized to meet that and not look the other way.
I'm talking about just the erosion of what's required in the building code at other levels. If we can hold their feet to the fire and meet it, that's great. But if the code gets eroded.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the risk is.
Then it doesn't matter
if
which
there's a standardization, and it's cheaper to standardize this, that we sacrifice your particular code. We just can't have buildings, roof structures collapsing because of snow loads and things like that. I'm not sure what else, other kinds of things we could try. I mean, maybe there's some seismic stuff, but it's generally not as much of a consideration with the frame built.
So we do have a slide of question up right now. How do you feel about licensed third-party inspections for modular construction? Again, we can't take a vote on it because there's not a bill. But as we're having these conversations over the next couple of weeks, we're just looking for the snapshot here. The non-voting members of the board are welcome to do these too, because again, we're not taking a vote.
Is there any consideration, trying to discuss alternatives to have lower cost housing? Any discussion about 3D printing, which I understand is an up and coming thing, especially in some parts of the country? These ginormous extruders that.
Yeah, I think what I'm looking at is this modular building is something of that. That's on site. 3D
That's
printing,
on site,
yeah.
that's on site, where they have this big.
Yeah, I think
extruder
that's,
come out
yeah.
And can build a home within literally a week.
Right,
So here's how I'll answer that question, Councilmember. That is, it's come up at a very high level as, for example, the industry could be going there. At this point, I'm not aware of that happening in Utah yet, but I think what the whole conversation here is about is what does the future of home building look like? And have the regulatory scheme in place in advance for those potential changes. So I've heard 3D printing come up probably 4 or 5 meetings this summer, but it's always just been the industry is going that way at some point.
Right now, the 3D printing there's some work going on there. And they do inspection just like you do at home now.
Right.
Same type of.
Okay, we've got 16 responses. Let's go to the next one. But this is helpful. They're somewhat comfortable. So kind of the wheel of the body is okay. Still have some questions, but keep going down this path.
Last one was inspection, this one's plan reviews.
Wow.
Okay. This one's a little more, this one, more concerns. Not quite evenly divided, more concerns. The other one was more comfort, still questions to work out. This has been a super helpful dialogue. Because this is the one big issue that all stakeholders have agreed. There's a path forward here that could make a real difference in the housing affordability space if done right. Jared, any other final questions that you have for the board while you got them?
I do. There's one question, with third-party inspections, I think all of us need to be aware of the possibility or the open door. It's an uncomfortable conversation, but it may be one that, and that if you've got any alternatives to modular housing, what I'm talking about is opening the door for third-party inspections of on-site or third-party, essentially of anything, that third-party inspections can happen and the municipal building inspectors, that's just a reality. Some of you may remember previous House Bill 98 that eventually was vetoed by the governor a couple of years ago, but that is possibly an open door. And so I guess my question, and it's, I don't think we have a Slido question on it, but does that change your support of modular construction?
So I think we need to actually draw a hard line on this. I mean, modular construction is something that could be, offers an affordability option, it can be standardized and it can be quality. But if you start shipping the inspection responsibility on custom built stuff on site, that's where I still think we have an issue there with respect to conflicts of interest and not doing a good job. And we'll put Mayor Walker on the stand about that in terms of what can happen when we don't get listened to and our inspectors don't have an opportunity to inspect things. And I think probably all of us have had experience where you get rogue contractors that either build stuff without permits or that's the same kind of thing. It isn't much different from not getting a permit and not getting an inspection to getting an inspection from your brother-in-law who you pay and he just rubber stamps everything without even going out there, he approved it on his lunch hour or chili, that's where I draw the line.
Well, this Slido question does try to legally distinguish between third-party inspection for modular, because essentially this is a different type of C of O than a non-modular C of O. So this would be an effort to demonstrate that they are legally different.
Yeah, I'm always, defective liability, because people are quick to come back to the city and say, you're the ones who set the inspection requirements, you're the ones who are supposed to oversee the inspection requirements, so you can't. You remove that liability.
Yeah, even if there isn't technically liability, there's still the black eye. It's a public perception that we're not doing our job.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree there.
I think that shifts pretty quick though. I think the vast majority of the general public doesn't realize who's inspecting the house. I think it quickly shifts if that goes to a third-party inspector. If that's just done outside, it's not the city's responsibility. Builders come in, city hires an inspector, it's an outside inspector, make sure it's taken care of. I mean, we do that with a lot of our.
Well, I think a lot of us do that.
Multifamily right now.
We hire outside inspection firms, but they owe their allegiance to the city, not to their brother-in-law, the general contractor.
We don't want it to be a buyer beware. Totally.
Perfect. Great.
Thank you.
Jared, thank you for the presentation. Thank you everyone for the dialogue. Mayor Kafusi, the executive director report can be done in 1 minute. So the good news is we budgeted 10 minutes for it. So we're going to use that time. We'll probably be about 5 minutes over time here, but we do have a couple more Slido questions independent of modular that we need feedback from this group on for these upcoming meetings. And so.
Are you doing the PowerPoint frame it or do you usually?
Let's do the PowerPoint. So Nick, you just keep in the board packet, go back to the PowerPoint or to the PowerPoint slides within the board packet. I'm going to quickly set it up and then we'll do this. We'll switch to Slido. So go down to slide 4. Okay, perfect. So here's the table. We've highlighted in blue the things we wanted to ask about today. I'm going to start with the one in the bottom right corner. I referenced it earlier about the garages, and when we asked you for your top 4, you're most comfortable with the garages was in the top 3. So we're going to ask you a Slido question here momentarily, and 2 different pieces of this that have come up this summer. Question number 1 is if the state were to put a limit on the maximum size of a garage the city could require for an attached single-family unit. The second question would be that if there was a garage of a certain size, that would count toward the on-site parking minimum requirements that the city has, because we do have, again, some local governments that have not counted those garages before. And these are things that developers have brought to us that they said we could build a smaller house if we didn't have these other pieces. Again, there's not a bill yet. We're just trying to get a sense of your comfort level on that one. Nick, while we're in the slide, let's just go. Let me present the other one, and then we can just do all the slide on rapid fire. Right here, perfect. That's the modular piece that we just discussed. We'll come back to the regular reviews at a future meeting. Go down, Nick. But this was all in your packet, so you can go back and look through it, because all these things are going to be coming back at some point or another. We're actually going to be doing Slido for a bunch of the things that are not highlighted in blue at LPC today. So just be prepared that it's a heavy Slido day. What's listed under the CHOP funding, housing affordability pieces 1 through 4, these are all coming from Wayne Niederhauser's office. Molly, do you want to take just 1 minute to do a quick overview of what they are? We're not going to vote on these today, but we will vote on them in the October meeting. So Molly.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first 4 that you see, these aren't necessarily the order that they were presented out of CHOP, but they were just kind of sectioned by ongoing, one time, and then by topic. So the $15 million ongoing for permanent supportive housing is a bit of a rebrand. It's not necessarily permanent supportive housing. The CHA just liked that terminology for the Red Flow program. So this has previously been attainable housing, also has been supportive housing, but this is essentially $15 million to provide rent flows for those affordable builds. Essentially, it's to cover things like utilities, kind of ongoing maintenance, things that keep the lights on once it has been built. $10 million is for Olin Walker gap financing. As the mayor mentioned, financing for all housing right now is difficult to come by, and it's impossible essentially to make anything affordable pencil. And so this is additional funding to try to get that gap funding in to make it so that when a unit is built, it can actually be affordable. $50 million for a one-time for deeply affordable. This is for new projects that will be built and come online throughout the state. 25 million is for the preservation fund. And so these are things like the buying of the deed restrictions that are expiring on currently affordable units, converting existing units into affordable units. It's a much more cost-effective and time-efficient way to get an affordable unit on the market. So that's all within that space. Are there any questions on those? If not, I'll jump ahead. Yeah.
Can we get HUD funding if we use this? When we went to Miami, we talked about if we had some ongoing funding for housing, affordability for the unsheltered, we could get, it would trigger HUD funding back to the state.
I do not know, but I'm happy to look into it.
All right.
Yeah. For that second section, child funding for DWS admin, DWS brought up the point that there's been a lot of legislation putting more and more duties on their offices, with more reporting and maintenance, but they have never received a staff increase to really accommodate that, or they received one. And so they're getting additional funding to support their office and have another person who will interface with cities. And then jumping down to homelessness, there's an ask for $2.5 million ongoing to the mitigation fund. As you'll remember, last year we asked for the locals would come in with more money and asked the state to come in with more money. They came in with one-time funding, so the ask is just to make that ongoing, so the state and local governments will be closer to parity. And then Wayne is also pursuing a new revenue source for homeless services within the state. And so trying to find a new way to essentially generate about $40 million in revenue that can go to homeless services statewide.
And just that, for those of you not in Salt Lake County, and we went through this exercise like we've done the second year, we actually, made a much more robust winter overflow shelter plan to accommodate up to 600 individuals. But the problem that we had with it is that there wasn't any funding for it. Today, I mean, the state, Wayne has had to scrape around, and actually he's going to be taking money for some other projects that would actually do more to make more people affordable housing available. He's having to rob Peter to pay Paul just to do the temporary overflow. So that additional funding for that is critical to actually solve this problem rather than just keep putting Band-Aids on it and warehouse people. So.
Well, we'll be asking for a vote in October because there are still some missing pieces here. Councilmember Dugan, you referenced Miami. There's still a lot of dialogue right now around the so-called Miami model, what that new revenue source may be, and all these pieces will fit together. So we're not asking for a vote on this today. We just wanted to put it in front of you to be prepared for 3 weeks from now. What we are going to ask for on the slide will be those 2 questions on garages, and then next down. And I guess, Molly, that last slide actually shows how Wayne's proposal of the dollars fit together. So take a look at that slide. If you have follow-up questions, let staff know, and just know we'll be voting on these concepts next month. But what's highlighted in blue at the bottom right, can you also scan down to see Transinnovation grants? Perfect. These are items that Mayor Ramsey and I have to cast votes on in 2 days. The UESC Growth and Transportation Group is going to be looking at these. I'm going to focus primarily on 2, 3, 4, and 1. So we'll skip the criteria for now. Parking structure fund for infill. This is something that actually came out of our spring meetings, but the idea of having the state, and I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, state provides some infrastructure dollars to help a redeveloping community that is going to have housing within a mixed-use project. So you could think of anything from a large-scale thing like a Provo Town Center to a smaller, more regional facility or Jordan Landing or downtown Kaysville. Going to pick the area where a parking structure could facilitate redevelopment, but they would need to meet certain housing goals in order to do so. The second piece is the State Infrastructure Bank. Last year, we were successful at expanding the uses and the criteria to allow for utilities in greenfield areas. It just was not funded. So trying to come back and get it funded. Number 4 also came from our members. Feels like right now it's on life support compared to the other 2 have a lot more interest, a lot more meat on the bone. So our recommendation on number 4, same kind of concept, but the state dollars would go to help pay for parking or pay for parks or playing fields in high growth areas. Just not enough meat on the bones yet for that one. So our recommendation as staff is we focus on 2 and 3 for this coming year, especially since revenue projections are down and it's going to be a much tighter state budget than it has been for the last few years. Likewise, transit innovation grants came from our members. Same thing, looking for dollars to help expand transit ridership, but it would be locally driven, figure out how to increase ridership in the Southwest Valley or Salt Lake or Davis County or wherever the case may be. So that's the quick background. Carson, can we switch over to Slido? We'll ask these 3 final Slido questions and then we can hit the road for LPC. And really what we're looking at is just if these programs, well, let's start with the garage piece. I'm looking for, we're doing this. No, this is fine. We'll start with this one. So if there were dollars available in transit innovation grants, the parking structure fund, state infrastructure bank for Greenfield utility, since the other criteria is on there, I'll just quickly explain that one. Right now, under state law, you need to do 3 or 4 menu items to be compliant with moderate income housing plans. And we're starting to get compliance reports back from the state. Most cities are in compliance thus far, but not all. Last year, we put a provision in law that said if you go above and beyond the 3 or 4 with 2 additional items, then you get enhanced prioritization for state dollars. And the thought here was rather than going above and beyond with just 2 of any items, if the state were to say, we really want to focus on missing middle, so that's the above and beyond item. It's more narrowly targeted rather than just any of the items off the menu. So which ones of these would you utilize? We want to be able to report back to state leaders that if they invest in these programs, that it will make a meaningful difference on the ground because communities would look to partner on them. We're at 13, we'll keep this open for about 10 more seconds.
Well, this is going to be really helpful, huh?
You're still gonna know what to do when you're this.
No, this is great though. That's what I want to say is like, this would be a good bang for the state buck to get to the outcomes that we all want.
Nice.
Thank you. I'm assuming that was you to make those numbers work out.
You're welcome.
Okay, next question, last 2 Slido questions, both in the garage space. And we don't have a specific bill for you, but if the state defined a maximum garage size, we're not even saying what that number is, but just said maximum garage size, you can only require up to this size. You can only require up to this size. Is that, where does that fit on our spectrum? The idea being that having that type of upper limit could help facilitate smaller housing units.
Nobody gets to buy an F-350.
Right, I was wondering, yeah, can you have your
Long bed pickup trucks are out.
yeah.
I have garages like at my house, which I don't even know how they got cars in there. I have no idea. I mean, maybe there's like a Nash Rambler that fit in there at some point, but
Nick, can you go to the next question?
no grocery reviewing, whatever.
Okay, so then
Better.
state requiring a garage of a certain size counts towards the city's parking minimum. So again, the fact pattern here that we've been presented with is there having some local governments that have said, yes, even though the house is being built with the garage, we're not counting the garage toward the minimum of
Off-street parking.
Right, for off-street parking.
We count it as our off-street parking.
This is us throwing those cities on.
So this, yeah, so Seth just made a comment I think is important for people to hear. So this is us throwing these cities under the bus. Last year, we had several discussions as a board of how much political capital do we want to spend on cities that can be shown are truly being bad actors in the planning space. And we had several meetings, and we ultimately agreed as a group with the consequence for non-compliance with MIHP, and one of the strategic goals you've given us as staff is maximize political capital at the Capitol. And so, what I'm reading from here said, I think you're essentially right that if cities are doing this, we're not gonna defend this sort of practice. We are gonna defend our underlying policy, our underlying planning authority and land use authority. But we're not gonna defend things that are not resulting in good planning outcomes.
Well, the other thing that, I mean, that came through discussions we've had at the CHA and all that is that there are bad actor cities. And the governor even said some cities are planning to do, so there's that perception out there. And it may be that that some folks are gonna need to make some compromises about what they do, so.
Quick question, this one, Ken. What's to keep that city from them just like requiring an additional parking?
Yeah, I guess that's a good question, and the answer is to be determined, right? Like, this is the quick snapshot, because this is where we think the conversation is gonna go over the next couple of weeks. So this has been helpful. We'll be doing a lot more Slido at LPC, which we need to leave for. Mary Kafutzi, my executive director report is simply stay tuned. There's a lot happening in this space. If there's any board member that's planning on going to the National League of Cities Conference in Atlanta, please let us know, because we'll be hosting an event. So
Come join us. We're gonna have.
hold on, 30 seconds.
Good.
30 seconds before we wrap. Hey, real quick, 30 seconds before we wrap, so people online can hear. If you're interested in going to the National League of Cities in Atlanta, let us know so we can get a calendar who's going to be there. Again, we as league staff are going to be hosting a housing deep dive with other state leagues here in October. We're excited about that and really appreciate everybody's time and feedback today.
Motion to adjourn.
So.
Second.